Hey, everybody, it's Carter Froelich. And our mission at Launch Development Finance Advisors is to be a hero to the land development and home building community. We do that through a lot of different ways, but one of the ways that I want to give back to the industry is to be able to share our experience as well as the experience of a myriad of different players in our industry, their experience, what they've learned, what they're doing, and just the knowledge that they have to provide to the industry. With that having been said, I hope you enjoy this episode. And if there's anything that we can do at launch to help you finance infrastructure, reduce costs, mitigate risk, all with the goal of enhancing project profitability and returns, please give us a call at the contact information in the show notes.
Welcome to the Land to Lots podcast, powered by Launch Development Finance Advisors. And now your host, Carter Froelich.
Welcome back to our continued conversation with Chris Meany of Wilson Meany on Treasure Island. So Treasure Island, we've negotiated with the Treasure Island Development Authority. We have our consortium. We know what our land uses are. The other thing that I found really interesting is that I did not know this, but Treasure Island is a man-made island, and it was I think constructed in the 30s. It was going to be the airport, and I think maybe you want to talk a little bit about the history, because the history of the island, the naval base, its adjacency to downtown, to the ferry building. How did you take all of that and some of the other issues I'm sure you're going to talk about with the Clipper planes and bring that into the essence of the place, and or did you?
Great question, and the answer is yes and no. I'll get to that a little bit, but I will expand a little bit on that history for a moment. So in the 1930s, we as a country were in pretty dismal economic shape, and as part of the efforts to do public works in the 30s in San Francisco, in the region, we built both the Bay Bridge connecting San Francisco to the East Bay and the Golden Gate Bridge connecting San Francisco to Marin. By the way, in the Golden Gate Bridge, probably one of the most beautiful man-made structures that exists in the country, and in the San Francisco Oakland East Bay Bridge, the only back-to-back suspension bridge, the two suspension bridges back-to-back in the country. They were really technical marvels. And as part of that work effort, as so much work was going on in the Bay and there was dredging of foundations, etc., the soils were laid on a very shallow portion of the bay floor just to the north of this existing island called Yerba Buena Island, which was a foundation point for the Bay Bridge. And as you noted, first, it was created to that man-made island to be the city's first municipal airport. And the idea was that air service in the 1930s included both planes that took off on land and planes that took off in water. And Treasure Island was the home of the Pan Am Clipper, which was the first commercial air service linking America to Asia. I used to, when I'd heard about it when I was a kid, I used to think of these Pan Am Clippers going off and everybody having martinis.
Yep. Wearing suits.
Wearing suits. And it turns out, by the way, the Pan Am Clipper service was puddle jumping across the Pacific. It took about 7 days to do it. But, the airport was built with 2 airplane hangars that still exist today, and a really beautiful Art Deco building that was the passenger terminal. But before Treasure Island was to go into service as that municipal airport, the decision was made to hold the World's Fair there. And so in 1939 and 1940, there was the Golden Gate Exhibition, and really talked to people who were there in that late 1930s. They talk about it. I mean, people all their lives remembered the experience of that year and going out to the island from all over the Bay Area. And but it ended. And in 1941, workers were in the process of converting this World's Fair site into the airport.
Mhm.
And Pearl Harbor happened.
Yeah.
And the United States government confiscated the island and used it as the point of embarkation to the Pacific Theater. And so this was the home of the Sixth Fleet. Many people have heard of Admiral Nimitz. This was his long-term home was on Yerba Buena Island here, and it was really this vital transit point for some 70 something years.
Yeah.
But San Francisco is not, the cheapest place to operate a big military complex. And so the federal government in the late 90s said, let's convert it. And that's what brought us to this story of creating this new neighborhood.
Okay. So in your agreement, I'd like to switch now a little bit to the entitlements and then the actual structure of your agreement with the Development Authority. So let's in your agreement, are you buying fee property or is it a leased fee interest? And could you explain to our listeners what the exact structure is and what you're providing for the residents and the commercial users?
Sure, Carter. I know your podcast is really intended to be a point of education for people.
Yeah.
In land development and the creation of master planned communities. I will answer all your questions. I will be very surprised if anybody will ever have to take the approaches we had to take.
And this is why, because this is such an extraordinary different. I mean, and this is the whole idea. We want to share this with everybody, and you've jumped through a lot of hoops here, so we're going to explain them all.
So a couple of points of background, and I'll try not to overrepeat.
Yeah.
First of all, we were the partner with the city of San Francisco in what was a three-way negotiation under the BRAC process. You had the federal government that possessed this land, and under its federal rules was trying to negotiate a transfer to the local reuse authority that was San Francisco. San Francisco was required to do a lot of things under the federal law to qualify. But the state of California was a participant as well, and this gets to your answer about the fee land, because the state of California, as the state of California does, wanting to make everything difficult, it interprets the public trust doctrine more stringently than they do in most other parts of the country. So the federal government says, we have taken this land over from the state when we took it over in the 1930s. Yeah. By the way, they compensated San Francisco after the war by giving the San Francisco a fort that they had down on the San Francisco Peninsula, which is why San Francisco's airport that it owns is actually, miles south of us, because that's what the federal government gave them in compensation for Treasure Island. And the federal government said, so we own it. There are no local rules that apply to this. And so we want you to develop it to meet our federal government requirements. And a first note that I'd make to you is, under the BRAC process, you there are different ways to transfer land. And when you do a big, long, complicated project, the federal government can change and they can change their mind. So when we began the process, the federal rules were that this was to be transferred as an economic development conveyance, meaning the priority was how many jobs can you create there? Because a military base is being closed, depriving a local community of its jobs, you must create jobs. As we were nearing the end of our negotiation with the federal government changed, and we suddenly had a more right-oriented negotiating partner who said we could give a shit about all that. Let me say that again.
Yeah.
But we don't really care about economic conveyance. We want to know how much money you can pay us.
Yeah.
And to give you a sort of a fun little bit about that negotiation, given the cost of developing the island, we thought the land was worth roughly zero. We were overpaying for it by
and that residual,
the infrastructure. And the federal government's opening gambit when they changed this perspective was that they wanted $1 billion for the island. So, $0 to $1 billion was the bid ask.
Little difference, yeah.
From the state of California's position, they said, we don't buy the federal government's argument. We don't buy it. We believe that the public trust doctrine says navigable water in the 1850s is a public asset and you can't privatize it. And so when the federal government gives this land back to the state of California and the city of San Francisco, it's public trust land and you can't do anything with it that isn't public trust consistent, which they define to not be housing. And our region is blessed with public parks, so having another 500-acre public park didn't really seem good to the city of San Francisco. So that was the negotiation was complex. Public trust land can't be fee. So the ultimate negotiation was that we worked out with the state of California and help of the state legislature an agreement whereby certain land on Yerba Buena Island, which everybody agreed was not subject to the trust, would get permanent protection in exchange for having an offsetting amount of Treasure Island free of the public trust. So the land that we have, the footprint for residential land is entirely owned in fee.
Okay.
But the public parks will remain under the public trust.
Yeah. Thanks for going through that. I mean, brilliantly laid out. I mean, it's because it is an interesting structure, at least that I found in what I know about Treasure Island. So you brought up federal government thinks it's worth $1 billion. We think it's worth zero because of the amount of infrastructure that has to go in. Why don't you just give us the land and we'll develop it? And so that's going to bring me into entitlements and then financing. Is there a preference on which one you want to start with first?
Well, I think they're
related, but
they're related. And I'll start, Carter, by going to kind of what is the structure of this development? And when you say, well, kind of what is the economic driver here? We really haven't discussed it at all. So we start out by saying a naval station is a wonderful place in terms of the security it can give us as Americans. It turns out to not be a great maintainer of basic infrastructure over the years. So everybody recognized that essentially 100% of the infrastructure on Treasure Island was past its useful life. Also, everybody recognized that there was little historic fabric here. And you asked earlier a question about, are you trying to lean into the history or not? We're creating a new section of the city. we did an evaluation of what historic resources do we have. It turns out there's really only 3 buildings on the
Yeah.
island, on Treasure Island, that are actually truly historic, and those are the 2 airplane hangars and the
Mhm.
and the
And the
passenger
terminal. Yeah.
terminal. And so on the one hand, we said we're going to protect those and treat them consistent with the Secretary of the Interior standards for historic rehabilitation. But then the rest of the island, in which nothing is historic and in which we're building all new infrastructure, we're going to make that a very contemporary place, a
Mhm.
place of this moment, so that it shows what we do at this point in time to future generations. And so we think that's very appropriate that we have that from a placemaking standpoint, we have districts within
Yeah.
our. But as I mentioned, all of the infrastructure needed to be built new, and um, it was a man-made island, and we're in a seismic zone, and we're an island in which there's
Mhm.
sea level rise, and so our infrastructure needs had to address those things too.
Yeah.
So working with really the most sophisticated geotechnical engineers in the world. Our team was led by NGO, which is a great geotechnical firm. But we didn't just want to have, with all due respect, you know, bet 25,000 people, future on anyone's idea. So we actually convened whole symposium that involved kind of the best thinkers in the world
Oh.
to analyze and vet our proposals for the island. And we eventually settled on kind of I'll simplify it and say, first, we're going to strengthen the ground that we will build on
Mhm.
through a process that involved us taking the entire footprint of where our buildings will go,
Mhm.
meaning about half the land, because the farthest parts of the park we didn't need to do this on.
Yeah.
But where our buildings are, where our roads are, where our walking paths are, all of that, we cleared all underground obstructions. We put basically, depending on where we are, kind of a grid of like 5 foot on, five to a 5 by 5 grid. Sometimes it went as much
Yeah.
as 8 to 10 feet grid. Put wick drains down. We imported vibro compactors from Asia to bore into the ground and actually consolidate the soil through vibro compaction. We then surcharge, and where we have sensitive sites, we do deep soil mixing so that we end up creating
Wow.
30 to 40 foot thick pancake that makes living on Treasure Island um, a totally appropriate, safe
Yeah.
place in a the probable maximum earthquake. Much safer than many other parts of the city. And we did it in a way that has not only is it safe, but it was safe for the infrastructure. By creating a pancake across the
Yeah.
whole area, it meant that our key infrastructure that is going down the roads in a seismic event would not be shorn from the buildings because we have differential movements. The roads and the buildings are in that
Yeah.
same thick pancake. We can build buildings up to about 6 stories on mat slabs. We don't need deep foundations. We do
Yeah.
that. We go over that. The second thing we had to do from a unique from an infrastructure standpoint is, we wanted to appropriately reflect San Francisco's waterfront position in an age
Mhm.
we don't know what sea level rise will be. So, and I sort of gave away an answer there.
Yeah.
We come to the table humbly knowing that we don't know what the future is.
Yeah.
And so first thing we did is we took the range of estimates we could have for sea level rise at the end of this century,
Mhm.
took the most conservative versions. We looked at those in a king high tide 100-year storm event
Yeah.
and said we need kind of a 3 foot margin on top of that, which
Yeah.
had us import a couple million cubic yards of dirt to raise the elevation of where
Wow.
we're building that infrastructure, where we're building that housing. But importantly, very importantly, not knowing kind of what sea level rise will be, our plan needed to be adaptable. And so we set back from the western edge of the island,
Hmm.
all building 300 feet behind the water's edge, and made that 300-foot depth a park. Because,
Wow.
as you know,
Mhm.
we're not going to suddenly have a bathtub fill us up. We're going to have storm action.
Yeah.
And 100, 200 years from now, storms coming to the West Coast from the West, which is where they come from primarily, it'll those waves will just overtop into a park, and
Yeah.
the energy will be safe. And then finally, and getting to your expertise of finance, we have a CFD on Treasure Island.
Hmm.
As you know, most CFDs expire in 40 years after we've gotten
Yeah.
all that infrastructure repaid. And at Treasure Island, the CFD is a 999-year CFD.
Yeah.
And after all the infrastructure is paid for, that CFD will fund a resilience fund for sea level rise adaptation. So we've created areas where adaptations can be made, and we've
Hmm.
funded those adaptations, but we've also made it so those adaptations are 200 years from now.
Can be paid for. Awesome. And then also, we had redevelopment financing in California, and the governor got rid of that at some point. And there's also some tax increment that I believe that's available and with an EIFD as well. Could you just discuss that a little bit, Chris, and what that means for the project?
Sure. Well, um, to get to it, and what must be a question you have and your listeners have, how in the world could it be that you would take on
Yeah.
doing a couple $1 billion worth of infrastructure to create 8 to 10,000
Yeah.
housing sites? Um, in the in the many years we negotiated this project, negotiated with the city of San Francisco, Treasure Island, it was it was as a redevelopment project.
Yep.
So the idea is that we would go build the infrastructure, and we would capture the tax increment,
Hmm.
and that would be our return of our infrastructure costs. So we with the city of San Francisco negotiated this as a horizontal development venture.
Hmm.
So we um, roughly, I mean, it changes any moment in time. We probably saw more of our revenues coming from public financing than we did from land sales, right?
Yeah.
This project would not be possible but
Yeah.
for the tax increment.
Yeah.
And so when 3 months before the project was approved, while it was in its final round of hearings, the governor suddenly announces that redevelopment agencies are done. It was a bit of an awkward moment. And
To say the least. Yeah.
and we in San Francisco, I should say only because San Francisco is San Francisco, could it wade into Sacramento
Yeah.
and actually in short order really come up with this approach to using infrastructure financing districts to
Hmm.
replace kind of most of our funds. Most people know that the difference between redevelopment and these new infrastructure financing plans is that
Hmm.
it's intended to have only the affected agency give up its share of the potential increment. So
Yeah.
people aren't stealing,
Yeah.
government agencies aren't stealing from one another. Because San Francisco is the only city and county, they own a far larger share of tax increment than other
Yeah.
places. So we were able to adjust um, the city's exactions from us to
Yeah.
make up for part of the shortfall, and make it so that the infrastructure financing districts could fund the infrastructure.
And thanks for that and explaining that to our listeners. Now, You mentioned a couple of things, and I only work for the private sector. I love our public sector brethren, but you know, things change a lot. And the only development agreements, that the cities come back to us, the only people that have to adhere to the development agreements are the developers, it appears. And I may be a little, I may be a little jaded, don't know, but that's my experience. So we started this whole process in 2000. RFQs are going out, awarded in 2003. Through this time, we go through the Great Recession. Okay. We go through COVID. We go through the federal government changing their mind. Luckily, it went from left to right and more pro development. Just city councils, board of supervisors, they change all the time. Meanwhile, you're going to expend a gajillion dollars on infrastructure, shoring up the land, seawalls over time. How does one get comfortable with the entitlements to know that it's more shall versus may? If I ask you, city, to do something, this is going to happen. When I come to you with permits, you're going to approve them. How do you create the certainty and flexibility? How did you view the entitlement documents, the disposition agreements, the development agreements to create that certainty and flexibility that your organization's joint venture needed to be willing to expend all these dollars?
Let me answer that in 4 parts.
Okay.
Number one, let me tell you what our expectation was, what drove us as we went in. Let me then tell you about some of the challenges, how we have addressed those, and finally, what still needs to be addressed.
Okay.
So first, we considered it a desirable feature, in fact, kind of driving feature of our deal with the city, that the amount of money we would get to reimburse us through the public financing followed the amount of money we had to spend. So we understood going into the project that when we said it would take $1.5 billion, that on a project this long in scale and with all these problems, that we couldn't be certain that it would take. We're humble about our estimate.
Yeah.
And so we looked at it as, while we don't know what it'll be, that public financing will grow, is sufficient to actually grow and cover that. So that was considered, a feature. And knowing that San Francisco is a very housing constrained market, that our ability to proceed and at pace and get that tax increment in there was, we were reasonably confident of.
Yeah.
So what happened? What happened is that we have the kind of things that happen to people in California. CEQA was abused once again, and we had a 3-year delay and millions and millions of dollars, which, by the way, we survive.
Yeah.
It's just people that environmentalists, maybe, I don't think I'm telling a tale out of school when I say CEQA's been preserved so long despite all of its problems because people on the left and the right, both labor unions and environmentalists, believe it's a tool to slow down development. And unfortunately, it just makes the cost of housing in California, more expensive. But so we had that problem, which is a frequent California problem, CEQA being abused. But we had another problem, which is one that I don't think any of us foresaw at the beginning, and I'll just call it mission creep.
Okay. Yeah.
We, going into the project, negotiated with the city something called an interagency can't remember, a cooperation agreement in which all city departments signed on to a basis of design and kind of rules for the road for how we would go forward. And when it came to implementation, many of those agencies simply ignored what were written agreements. And it is an interesting thing that people say developers are, can't be trusted. And I will say, I'm pretty sure we lived up to our agreements.
Yeah.
And, but various city departments did not live up to theirs. And now I just want to say it. It's not because they were trying to be bad, but, if you're in charge of handicap accessibility and you decide, you want to set the standard for handicap access in the country, this would be a good place to do it. When you want to, every single level of city government thought this is an aspirational project, it should be gold plated.
Yeah.
And in earlier administrations, we mayoral administrations, we didn't always get we didn't have a disciplined city government to push back on that mission creep. And honestly, it caused huge problems for the project. I'm very grateful that over the last few years, certainly our present mayor, but even his predecessor, we were finally able to get people to see this. And they have great. And I would say the city of San Francisco is doing a really great job of being more disciplined about that. And I'd say it's partly the city of San Francisco kind of returning to kind of a path that I think most of its residents want, which is to be kind of us being this innovative capital, being a place that's for people in the center, moderate, and not always trying to be kind of a fringe place. Also, the state of California really setting out mandates for the creation of housing, and the city of San Francisco taking those very, very seriously.
With arena numbers and et cetera.
I'll make one final point, and this is not tied to Treasure Island. This is me as somebody who's, generations of my family have been in California, and I hope many generations of my family in the future will be here. But my family's future in California is threatened by the high cost of housing. And it doesn't matter what entitlements we put in place. It doesn't matter what the process is. It doesn't matter how beautiful this place is. If it continues to cost 50% more to create a housing unit in California than it does anywhere else, we are hobbling our children. And we as a community simply have not owned up to that. Everything going on at the state now is about how do we get more entitlements, and you hear no conversation about the fact that it doesn't matter. We won't be able to build. We can't make it that it costs less to build a home than the home is worth.
And I'm going to sidetrack a little bit. We had a roundtable with some of the Southern California developers and just said, is this something that we should start addressing and try to fix? And everybody just, meaning all of it, just how difficult it is to develop. And they said, we don't think it can be fixed, at least and we're just planning, 5 to 8 years, 9 years of entitlements in our pro forma. And I mean, it's kind of maddening, but it's as much as I love California, it's kind of broken. I don't know what else to say.
But Carter, you're an old guy like me. And it is on us to be leading the conversation here. There's a former member of our board of supervisors who is very fond of saying, as much as people talk about entitlements being a problem in San Francisco, it's a matter of when, not if. The truth of the matter is you can get entitlements in San Francisco. The problem is that entitlements don't provide anybody a home. We have we have a shortage of housing. We have people living
Mhm.
more in smaller spaces, doubled up. And it is not because of entitlements. It is
Yep.
because we have made it so expensive to build a home here. And that undermines our teachers, our policemen, our
Yep.
firemen,
Agreed.
the people that make our restaurants fun and happening. And honestly, it undermines the ability of people making $250,000 a year to live here.
Yeah.
Uh, it's a real problem. And you, Carter, and
Yeah.
me, we
Uh-huh.
have to be out saying that it's not okay to say it can't be fixed. It does not need to cost 50% more to build a house in
Yeah.
California than in another place.
And I agree with you. And I, for my personal, we got to start somewhere. Let's start chipping away at it. It may take 25 years, but let's start the 25 years now, today. Let's start changing it. And so anybody from the public sector hearing this, anybody from the private sector hearing this in California that wants to start a meaningful dialogue, I think the time is now. And we're starting to see some of the most affluent people leaving California. I mean, and this is not me. This is Zonda. This is and so if only the most affluent can buy in California and they're leaving, who's going to buy the houses? Yeah, and I mean, what's going to happen to the state as a? I mean, there's just so many different issues with this topic. But Chris, I digress there a bit, but let's go fix it. I mean, you've been really generous with your time, and I just want to give you just a couple lightning round before we sign off here. And Chris, thanks again. But it, is there for our readers or our listeners? Excuse me, for our listeners. Is there anything that if you could wave a magic wand, that the city, the county could do to help your development process move more efficiently or smoother? What would that be and why?
The want I have
Hmm.
is that we all understand the issue we were just talking about. In San Francisco, we want a community in which we accommodate a wide range of households at a wide range of income levels, because that's what makes our place creative, livable,
Yeah.
exciting. And and when people within government say, in my particular focused area, I want to be very aspirational. I want to set high standards so that I can drive change in the rest of the country.
Hmm.
When that makes housing so expensive that it doesn't get created and we leave people unhoused, we drive people out of our community, we are doing ourselves a disservice.
Yeah.
And so for me, I want people to change from saying we want to create utopia to saying we want to retain the really
Hmm.
vibrant, mixed income,
Yeah.
mixed perspective community that makes San Francisco great.
Yeah. And that social fabric is really what makes cities interesting. Is everybody together in one space. Uh, what's the best advice you've ever received or you've run across as it relates to negotiating with the private or with the public sector? Excuse me.
Oh, on a complicated deal like this, um, and not just at Treasure Island, we've seen this
Yeah.
we've done this a long time and a lot. Um, you have to understand that this is not the same kind of negotiation when you're buying a used car. We come to the table saying we have to be open book with
Mhm.
the city. We have to share with them our pro forma. We have to share with them our cost estimates. If they won't respect the returns we need to get to
Yep.
mobilize capital, we just need to move on and work with a different city. But
Yeah.
in the negotiation, it is be honest, be transparent.
Great. Chris, and here again, thanks for taking the time. to talk to our listeners. Is there anything you'd like to leave our listeners with, or a question that I should have asked that didn't, that you would like to end on?
I will just tell you that we've now completed 1,000 homes on Treasure Island out of what will be eventually, 8 to 10,000 homes, and it's pretty spectacular. It's still in the early going, but we hope people will come and visit us because it's a pretty special place.
And I will second that. It's fabulous, and I really enjoyed walking through the terminal. Well, first of all, going through all of the residences is just fabulous. The architecture, the design, the urban planning, just off the charts. But I really like the damn buildings that are built in the 30s. The Art Deco. and are you still thinking about turning that into a hotel? Is that going to be the 100 Keys, Chris?
If any hotel operators out there and wants to come and talk, I'm game.
There you go. You heard it here. Yeah, Chris, thanks for taking the time. And for our listeners, we'll be putting in our show notes references to the project, Chris's company's references, his contact information, if you're so willing. And so, Chris, thank you again for taking the time to speak with our listeners. And for all of our listeners, if you found this interesting, please pass it on to your team members and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Thank you very much.
You have been listening to the Land to Lots podcast with Carter Froelich. Follow us wherever you find your podcast to never miss a new episode.